Gunnar was a man of enormous size and strength. Every morning he woke before the sun and walked through the dense forest near his cabin, his boots crunching on fallen leaves and twigs. He was no ordinary lumberjack. The townspeople often whispered about his sheer power and skill. Trees that took others hours to fell in minutes under his axe. His arms were thick as tree trunks themselves, and his hands could grip anything with unshakable force. But despite his size, there was a gentleness in him, a patience that came from years of living close to the rhythm of nature. On this particular morning, the forest was quiet. The fog clung to the ground like a soft blanket, and the sunlight struggled to pierce through the thick canopy of leaves above. Gunnar was in the middle of chopping down a massive pine, sweat running down his brow, when a sudden shimmer caught his eye. At first he thought it was just a trick of the light, but then he saw movement, tiny flickers that seemed almost like fireflies but much brighter. Curious, Gunnar set down his axe and leaned closer. Out of the shimmer emerged two tiny figures floating in the air no taller than his thumb. Their skin glowed faintly, a soft mix of green and blue, and their eyes were wide with fear and urgency. Gunnar's mouth fell open. He had never seen anything like them. The smaller of the two waved frantically at him, pointing at the ground where a tiny, broken object lay. Gunnar squinted and realized it was a spaceship. So small it could fit in his hand, yet it looked incredibly complex. The ship's surface shimmered with alien metal, and delicate wires and panels were bent and broken. Gunnar crouched down slowly, careful not to scare them. Hey, it's okay," he said gently. The twins chirped and gestured wildly, pointing at the ship and then at the forest. Gunnar could tell they were in trouble, but he didn't understand their language. He extended his hand slowly, palm up, and the smaller twin climbed onto it, its tiny body trembling. The other twin hovered in the air, gesturing urgently toward the broken ship. Gunnar took a deep breath and studied the craft. "Looks like you got yourself in a bit of trouble, huh?" he murmured, smiling softly. The twins responded with a series of high-pitched sounds and gestures, clearly trying to explain something. Gunnar's mind raced. He didn't know much about alien technology, but he had spent decades figuring out problems in the forest. Maybe he could help. Carefully, he picked up the ship. It was lighter than it looked, almost weightless in his enormous hands, but he had to be careful. One wrong movement, and it would crush the tiny twins or shatter entirely. Gunnar set the ship down on a flat rock and began examining it. The panels were bent and some wires hung loose. He thought about what he could use from the forest to repair it. Pine sap was sticky and strong when hardened. Vines could act as makeshift cables, and small sticks could be shaped as tools. The twins watched him closely, their glowing eyes wide with a mix of fear and hope. Gunnar nodded to himself and began gathering materials. He collected thin twigs, careful strips of bark, and sticky pine sap. The twins chirped excitedly, pointing at the ship and then at his tools, as if guiding him. Gunnar smiled. "Looks like we're going to do this together, huh?" As he worked, the sky darkened. Thick clouds rolled in, and a sudden gust of wind shook the trees. Gunnar glanced up. A storm was coming, and it would only make the task harder. He didn't panic. He had faced worse storms while working in the forest, but now the stakes were higher. The twins needed him, and he couldn't let anything happen to them. He carefully bent a thin twig and used it to prop up a delicate panel. He applied pine sap to hold it in place. The twins cheered in their tiny way, their chirps echoing in the forest. Gunnar chuckled. "Easy there, little buddies. We've got to be gentle." He worked methodically, each movement precise despite his enormous size. It was a strange sight. A giant man using forest materials to repair a spaceship no bigger than a teacup. Minutes felt like hours as he worked. The storm approached faster than he expected, and soon rain began to fall. Light at first, but quickly turning into a downpour. Gunnar held the ship in one hand, shielding it with his other arm, while the twins clung to his fingers. The glowing light from the twins illuminated the dark forest, creating an almost magical scene. Gunnar felt a surge of responsibility. These tiny beings had come from a faraway world, and now their lives rested in his hands. He paused for a moment, looking at them. "Don't worry. We'll get you fixed up. Just hold on." The twins responded with a soft, synchronized chirp, as if saying thank you. Gunnar smiled, feeling an unexpected warmth in his chest. Helping them wasn't just about curiosity anymore. It was about doing the right thing. Suddenly, a loud rustling came from the trees. Gunnar tensed. The forest was alive with movement, and something large was approaching. The twins clung tighter to his fingers, their tiny bodies trembling. Gunner's heart rate quickened, but he didn't panic. He scanned the area and saw shadows moving in the rain. Giant predators, creatures from the forest that had never seen such a tiny spaceship, or perhaps they sensed the twins' energy, were making their way toward them. Gunner's mind raced. He couldn't fight the storm and the predators at the same time, but he could use the environment to his advantage. He grabbed a few fallen logs and set them in strategic positions, creating barriers between the predators and the tiny ship. He used vines to tie branches together, forming makeshift traps. Each action was precise, and he moved with the skill of someone who knew the forest better than anyone else. The twins watched in awe. They had never seen a being with such strength combined with care and intelligence. One of them gestured toward Gunner's hands as if encouraging him, while the other hovered near the ship, pointing at the damaged core. Gunner realized they wanted him to repair it first before the predators got too close. He took a deep breath and focused. Using a thin strip of bark, he carefully lifted a bent wire and connected it to a tiny port. The pine sap hardened quickly in the rain, securing the delicate piece. Another tiny panel clicked into place under his careful guidance. The twins chirped excitedly, jumping onto his fingers and shoulders as if celebrating each small victory. Minutes passed, and the storm grew stronger. Rain poured down, soaking Gunner to the bone, but he didn't stop. His hands moved with surprising delicacy, his massive fingers careful not to crush the tiny ship. He adjusted wires, propped panels, and applied sticky sap until the ship began to hum softly. A faint glow pulsed from its core, a sign that it was powering up. The predators were getting closer now, their glowing eyes cutting through the rain. Gunner's heart pounded, but he stayed calm. He picked up a large branch and positioned it between himself and the creatures, ready to defend the twins if needed. But he knew brute force wasn't enough. He had to use his wits. With a swift motion, he triggered one of his traps. A log swung down, startling a predator and giving him a chance to move the ship higher out of reach. The twins cheered again, their glowing bodies bright against the dark, rainy forest. Gunner smiled through the rain, feeling a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. They were almost there. Finally, after what felt like hours, the last connection clicked into place. The ship glowed brighter and small wings extended from its sides, stabilizing it. Gunner held it carefully, marveling at the tiny but powerful craft. The twins climbed onto his hand, their tiny bodies trembling with excitement and relief. They chirped in a synchronized melody, and Gunner could almost feel their gratitude. He looked around at the forest, the storm still raging but the predators retreating, confused by his clever traps. Gunner realized something profound. Strength alone wasn't enough. Intelligence, creativity, and a willingness to help others, no matter how small, were what truly made a difference. The twins pointed at the sky, and then at Gunner, their glowing eyes filled with emotion. They were ready to leave. Gunner nodded, lifting the ship gently into the air. It hovered for a moment, then shot upward, disappearing into the clouds and rain, leaving a trail of shimmering light behind. Gunner watched them go, feeling a strange emptiness but also pride. He had helped beings from another world, beings no one else could have even imagined, and in doing so he had discovered something about himself. That being a giant wasn't just about physical strength, but about having a heart big enough to care for the smallest and most fragile creatures. As the rain eased and the sun began to peek through the clouds, Gunner returned to his cabin tired but happy. The forest around him seemed brighter somehow, alive with possibilities he had never considered. He picked up his axe and looked at the trees with new appreciation. The world was bigger than he had imagined, and now he knew that humans too could make a difference in ways no one had expected. The twins were gone, but their impact lingered. Gunner smiled to himself, knowing that if ever they returned, he would be ready. And deep down, he knew this was just the beginning of an adventure that would test his strength, intelligence, and heart in ways he could never have imagined. Gunner stood in the forest, the smell of wet pine filling his lungs. The storm had passed, leaving glistening droplets on leaves and branches, and a rainbow arched faintly across the sky. He thought about the tiny twins, shimmering beings from another world, and the fragile spaceship that now hummed somewhere high above the clouds. Even though they were gone, their presence lingered like a gentle pulse in the air. Gunnar had always felt connected to the forest, but now he realized the universe itself had just brushed against him. The next morning, Gunnar returned to his usual routine, chopping trees and clearing paths, but his mind was elsewhere. Every sound, the chirp of a bird, the rustle of leaves, reminded him of the twins' tiny voices. He had barely slept, thinking about the delicate ship and the intelligence contained in being so small. His body was strong, able to fell trees and lift massive logs, but it was his mind and heart that had truly been tested. As he moved through the forest, he noticed something strange. Tiny glowing footprints marked the path between the edge of the forest and a small clearing. Gunnar crouched down, his massive fingers hovering over the marks. The footprints shimmered faintly, identical in size to the twins' tiny feet. Gunnar's heart quickened. Could they have returned? His hands shook slightly, not from fear but anticipation. Suddenly, a faint hum filled the air. Gunnar looked up and saw a flash of light descending toward the clearing. The tiny ship, repaired and shining brilliantly, hovered in front of him. The twins were aboard, waving frantically. Gunnar grinned, his heart pounding with excitement. The storm, the predators, the forest, all of it had led to this moment. He carefully approached, and the ship lowered until it was close enough for the twins to climb onto his hand. They were dripping with energy, their glow brighter than before. Gunnar studied them, noticing subtle differences. Their expressions were more confident, and their tiny bodies seemed stronger. The twins chirped rapidly, pointing toward the deeper forest, and then gestured at Gunnar. They wanted him to follow. Curious and cautious, Gunnar wiped his hands and moved into the forest with the tiny beings perched on his shoulders. They led him through paths he had never noticed, winding past ancient trees and sparkling streams. The twins' glow illuminated the dense underbrush, creating an almost magical trail. After walking for what felt like hours, they reached a hidden grove where the forest opened up into a strange, radiant glade. In the center of the glade stood a structure unlike anything Gunnar had seen. It was a small, crystalline dome, shimmering with energy and pulsing light. Gunnar felt a strange warmth in his chest as he approached. The twins chirped excitedly, pointing at the dome and then gesturing for him to enter. Gunnar hesitated for a moment. He was a man of the forest, strong and grounded, but stepping into this alien place filled him with awe and uncertainty. Taking a deep breath, he stepped inside. The dome was filled with delicate machinery and floating orbs of light. Panels and screens displayed symbols that he couldn't understand, yet he sensed the intelligence behind them. The twins hopped onto a console and pressed a series of tiny buttons. A holographic projection appeared, showing a vast alien world filled with forests, mountains, and oceans. Gunnar's eyes widened. The twins chirped, pointing at the hologram, and then gestured toward Gunnar. They wanted him to help them with something crucial. Gunnar realized they were showing him their home planet and the danger it faced. A massive asteroid was on a collision course, threatening to destroy the twins' world. The twins' eyes glowed with urgency, and Gunnar understood. They needed his strength and ingenuity to prevent a catastrophe. He nodded, determination settling in. "All right, little buddies, let's see what we can do." The twins chirped in excitement, their tiny hands touching his massive fingers as if sealing a pact. Gunnar studied the holographic display. The asteroid was enormous, and the twins' technology alone couldn't stop it. They needed something human, something strong, something clever. Gunnar's mind raced as he formulated a plan. Using his knowledge of leverage, weight, and force, Gunnar suggested constructing a massive catapult to redirect the asteroid. The twins chirped excitedly, pointing at different components in the dome. Gunnar realized they were giving him precise instructions, combining their advanced technology with his physical understanding of the world. It was the perfect combination: human strength and alien intelligence. Gunnar set out into the forest again, this time gathering enormous logs, thick vines, and large stones. The twins guided him, directing his movements with tiny gestures and glowing signals. Day after day, Gunnar worked tirelessly, constructing the massive structure in a clearing near the edge of the forest. He rolled boulders, tied vines with meticulous care, and adjusted angles with precision. Every step required patience and attention to detail, but he relished the challenge. The twins remained by his side, offering guidance and encouragement. Their bond with Gunnar grew stronger each day. They trusted him completely, and he, in turn, felt a deep responsibility for their lives and the fate of their world. As the catapult neared completion, A sense of excitement and tension filled the air. The final test was approaching, and the asteroid was visible in the night sky, a glowing thread against the dark backdrop of stars. Gunnar climbed onto the catapult, inspecting the massive stone projectile that would redirect the asteroid. The twins hovered near him, chirping instructions. Gunnar adjusted the tension of the vines, ensuring the release mechanism would work perfectly. Every detail mattered. A single misstep could mean failure. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. At last, the moment arrived. Gunnar pulled the release lever with all his strength. The stone rocketed through the air with incredible speed, guided by the precise angles he had set. The asteroid, enormous and fiery, approached rapidly. Gunnar held his breath as the stone struck the asteroid, its force enough to change its trajectory just enough to avoid the twins' planet. The twins chirped loudly, glowing brighter than ever as the asteroid shifted away, narrowly missing their world. Gunnar watched in awe as the threat passed, relief flooding through him. The twins flew toward him, landing on his massive hands and shoulders, chirping in joy and gratitude. Gunnar smiled, exhausted but triumphant. He had used his strength, his intelligence, and his heart to save a world far beyond his own. The twins led him back to their ship, their tiny bodies vibrating with excitement. They gestured for him to enter, and Gunnar carefully stepped inside. The ship lifted off the ground, soaring above the forest and into the sky. As they traveled, the twins showed him glimpses of their world from above. Oceans, forests, mountains, and cities glowing with energy. Gunnar felt a profound connection to the universe he had never experienced before. Finally, the ship landed back in the clearing near his cabin. The twins hovered in the air, chirping and glowing, and then presented him with a small device no bigger than his palm. They gestured for him to take it. Gunnar understood. It was a gift, a symbol of gratitude, and a tool that could help the forest thrive even more. He held it carefully, marveling at the intricate design. The twins waved goodbye, their tiny forms shimmering as they lifted off once more, disappearing into the sky. Gunnar watched them go, feeling a mix of pride, wonder, and a touch of sadness. He had become more than a lumberjack. He had become a hero in a story that spanned worlds. The forest around him seemed alive with possibilities, as if acknowledging the extraordinary events that had unfolded. Gunnar returned to his cabin, placing the device carefully on his workbench. He picked up his axe and walked into the forest, the sun shining through the trees. Every sound, every movement felt different now. The forest was no longer just a home. It was part of a larger universe connected to beings and worlds he had never imagined. Days passed, but Gunnar never forgot the twins. Occasionally, he would find tiny glowing footprints in the clearing or a faint shimmer in the distance, reminders of the friends he had made and the adventure he had lived. He worked in the forest with renewed purpose, knowing that strength alone was not enough and that courage, intelligence, and kindness could ripple across galaxies. The story of Gunnar and the tiny alien twins became a legend, though few in his village knew the full truth. To them, he was simply a giant lumberjack with unmatched skill. But Gunnar knew better. He had faced challenges that no one else could, had saved a world far beyond his own, and had discovered that being human meant more than just strength. It meant heart, ingenuity, and a willingness to step into the unknown. And as he looked up at the stars each night, Gunnar smiled, remembering the tiny glowing beings who had changed his life forever. He knew that one day they might return, and when they did, he would be ready. The universe was vast and full of wonders, and Gunnar was no longer just a man of the forest. He was a guardian, a friend, and a hero whose courage had bridged the gap between worlds.